On the island of Sodor, it is easy to forget that there are many different modes of transportation, since the railway is the most popular and the most well documented. Where the railway lines don't go, there is a small bus service that runs between the countryside and the surrounding towns all over the island. The services of Bertie, Algie, and other buses help keep Sodor moving along like clockwork. On the road leading between Drya and Crosby, there lays a small bus shelter and the remains of some old houses. The shelter and the houses had stood there for many years and hadn't been touched for a long time. The buildings were overgrown and falling apart, but whenever Bertie or Algie came up to it, their drivers would stop them so visitors could take pictures of the ruins, and they quickly became a roadside attraction. One hot summer day, Bertie had just finished his last run of the day and was on his way back to the bus depot. As he toiled along, he could feel growing pain. Ouch, he said to himself. I must have my driver look at it, but he never got the chance. As he drove up the hill toward the old bus shelter, there was an ear-splitting crack. Bertie's driver brought him to a sudden stop on the side of the road and got down to see what had happened. Your drive shaft has snapped, he said. You're not going anywhere now. Bother, Bertie sighed. His driver got out some road triangles to prevent another vehicle from colliding with the stalled bus and went to go telephone for Butch. When he returned, he had bad news. I'm afraid Butch's garage is closed early for the night, so I guess you'll be stuck here, Bertie. Oh, joy, Bertie fumed. I was looking forward to a rest at the depot. His driver hitched a ride home, leaving Bertie all alone on the side of the road. Night came, and Bertie began to feel very lonely. In the weak moonlight, the old bus shelter and ruined buildings looked more sinister as the branches of the bushes moved in the wind, making it look like odd creatures of indistinguishable shape and size were waiting to attack. Bertie shivered at the thought of monsters. He wasn't normally afraid of the dark, but it was mostly what could be in the dark that frightened him the most. A low mist began to form as the temperature dropped. Bertie closed his eyes to try and drift off to sleep, so he could get this long night over with. He had only had his eyes closed for a few moments when he thought he could hear the sound of another vehicle coming down the road. He opened his eyes and looked into the misty night. Hello? Is someone there? He called. No reply came. As he watched, a pale white bus rolled up out of the darkness and came to a stop at the old shelter. It hardly made a sound as it stood there in complete silence, as if waiting for passengers. Then as it began to leave, it faded away, like it had never been there. Suddenly came the horrific sound of an automobile crash. The sounds of crying people and twisting metal rang out across the valley. And then, silence. Dead silence. Bertie, in a state of pure terror, closed his eyes tightly and begged for the sun to rise. The next morning, Butch came to tow Bertie to the garage. As they drove along, Butch noticed that Bertie was unusually quiet. Are you all right? He called back. You aren't very chatty today. I'm fine, came the quick reply, and no more followed. Butch decided to ask Bertie what was bothering him later. At the garage, Bertie was placed on the lift in preparation to have his broken drive shaft removed and a new one placed in. Caroline sat outside in the yard enjoying the sun. She had just finished having her radiator fixed and was now waiting for her owner to come pick her up. She could see the red bus wasn't happy. What's the matter, youngster? She asked kindly. You look upset, and something in my engine block says it's not your broken drive shaft. Bertie looked over at the old car. He thought Caroline might laugh at him, but he decided to tell her anyway. Well, Yes, Caroline. There is something bothering me, he said. Tell me then, she said kindly. As Bertie told her about his night, Caroline's cheerful smile fell. Butch almost couldn't believe what he was hearing. Oh dear, Caroline sighed when Bertie had finished telling her his story. I thought he would have moved on by now. Butch looked at her curiously. He? Did you know this bus? He asked. Yes, I did, Caroline said, but before she could explain, her owner returned to take her back home. I'll tell you later at the depot, she said as she drove away. Since Bertie was being repaired, Algie was rostered to take his route over. Algie didn't approve of the extra work. He barely had a moment to rest as he had to rush from stop to stop in order to keep up Bertie's schedule as well as his own. That afternoon, Algie was taking some passengers from Crosby to Dryall. The weather was starting to close in and mist started to form. The sooner Bertie is repaired, the better, he muttered as he struggled up the road. As he came up to the houses, the mist suddenly cleared to reveal a white bus standing in their way. Algie's driver stomped on the brakes and turned the wheel to avoid a rear ending. Algie closed his eyes, anticipating an accident, but all at once, the bus vanished. Algie ran off the road and into the bushes. The passengers were jolted from their seats by the force of the wreck. Suddenly there came the sound of an accident in the fog. The passengers picked themselves off the floor, looked out the windows to see if they could see an accident. But there was no accident on the road. Algie couldn't believe what he had just seen. That night, when Bertie came back, he was surprised to see Algie's expression. It appeared to be one of fear. Algie, what's wrong? Bertie, he replied, I just saw something impossible. But before he could continue, Caroline rolled into the yard. She saw Algie's expression, and at once she knew what he had seen. So, I see Algie has met Clark too, she said, and she began to explain. A few years ago, before you came here, another bus ran the country route from town to town. His name was Clark, and he ran a route called Route 21. He was a nice fellow, and always ran right on time. Every time he passed by my house, where I lived, he'd honk his horn hello to me. And whenever we had the chance, we would talk to each other. He was a truly wonderful friend. One misty rainy day, Clark arrived at the bus shelter slightly late. The rain had made his trip very slow. Once the passengers had got on, he drove away, when suddenly a lorry with fuel tanks came roaring down the road in the other direction. The driver lost control on the wet road and swerved into Clark, causing a fiery wreck. 2 passengers died, and the others were injured, some severely. Clark didn't make it through his accident. He was scrapped the next day. A few days later, the people living near the accident site heard the sounds of a horrific accident occurring again. They all rushed outside to check, but nothing was there. This continued for months until, fed up by the occurrences, all the people moved away, leaving their houses to ruin. Now whenever the mist rises around the ruins, Clark comes back to repeat his last moments over and over again. Algie and Bertie sat shocked by the story, almost unable to believe a word. But neither of them could deny that they had seen a ghost. You can keep your route, Algie said. I'm never taking that road again. Bertie said nothing, and for a long time afterwards, whenever he would pass that shelter and those ruins, he'd hold a moment of silence for Clark, the ghost of Country Route 21.